Well. This is embarrassing. So apparently, some high-ranking people in our government, especially the Defense Department folks, were chatting in a Signal chat, and they included a journalist in there by accident. So they were in a group chat talking about war plans, and they included a journalist in there by accident. Now, this is one of the best examples of why we have protocols and procedures that we follow, especially on Wall Street. I know people, it's frustrating in terms of red tape. And let me give you an example. I used to work at a major bank, one of the top five in the globe. And if I remember, yeah, in order for me to access certain servers, I had to open up a ticket every single time, and it had to get approved before I could access the server. Now this is after coming from another global bank where, I had access to just hop on servers whenever I wanted to. So trust me, it was very frustrating. And sometimes some of the protocols that we use might not be the best. There's, always, if you think there's a better way to do things, then, certainly suggest and try to improve things. But there's a reason why we have safety and certain protocols. Now, with that being said, let's talk about this potential security breach. So the question is, because they're sending messages over this private app, Signal, couldn't the people at Signal see these messages? So therefore, a huge security risk in terms of their battle plans being exposed. In theory, yes, but in reality, not so much. Let's talk about the type of encryption that the Signal app uses. And before we talk about that, let's talk about another factor. Now, it's their app, so you could design it however you want to. So you could design it in a way where you are able to get access to whatever you want to. Like, you have your private key or whatever, but whatever, it's my app, so I can go in and see your private key. Problem is they make it open source, right? So if they were to do that, have a backdoor in there or something like that, it would very likely be known because, again, it's open source. So people see it, they do audits on the software. And then in theory, they could outsmart the auditors and put a backdoor in there that no one's able to detect. But it's kind of risk reward ratio. What would they have to gain by introducing some kind of a backdoor like this, a security loophole? What could they gain from that would be worth completely destroying the company? I mean, one of the big things from Signal is how secure they are. If they were to do something like this and get caught, oh my goodness, it will be the end of them. So, although in theory, they could have some really, really smart people working for them, and they could orchestrate some kind of sneaky thing where they put a backdoor in there and all these people looking at the code and no one spots it. I mean, I could win $1 million, from the lottery. That could happen too. But I think that's perhaps much more likely than the scenario that I just described. So let's eliminate them putting in a mechanism which would allow them to basically see your messages. And what's preventing them from seeing the messages? And who can and cannot see the messages? Well, the reason that they can't see the messages is because they use these public and private key systems, which it's a very interesting security model because even the sender can't decrypt their own messages. Think about that. In order to decrypt the messages, you need the public and the private key. The private key resides only on the recipient device, right? So that means even you, the sender, it's your message that you're trying to send, even you cannot decrypt your own messages because the public key, right? And when we say public key, that would be belonging to who you're sending the message to. You're sending a message to someone, right? That person has a public key. It's publicly available or visible. So therefore, when I encrypt messages, when my phone encrypts messages that I'm sending, I will take advantage of the publicly accessible key of who I'm sending the message to. The problem is the public key is only half of what's required for decryption. So therefore, even though it's my message and I encrypted it, I can't decrypt it, right? You need the public and the private key to decrypt. It's a model where it's easy to lock, it's easy to encrypt, not so much to decrypt, not without the private key. So to understand how this works, basically you are creating a public and private key, right? So the public key is, again, public, everyone can see it, right? And then the private key is only on the recipient's device, right? These two keys are sort of interlocked in a way. They have a mathematical relationship that requires both keys to be able to unlock, right? So to give an analogy, I would say it's kind of, I know it's kind of tricky to understand. I'm trying to simplify it as best I can. That's what I'm known for here, right? Trying to make complex things simple. But this is, I will admit, something that is a little bit challenging, but I'm going to do my best. So the best analogy I could come up with is imagine if, so look at the encryption. So what's the encryption doing? You're locking it down, right? When I encrypt the message, I'm locking it down in terms of, so it can't be seen, right? I'm protecting it in that way. So, as an analogy, imagine a padlock. Anyone can lock a padlock, right? It's easy to lock a padlock, right? You just need fingers, right? You have your hand and you push it down, click, it's locked. Very easy to lock. Good luck, especially if it's a really good padlock, right? Good luck opening it, right? So I can give you my padlock and not the key, right? And you can lock away. Your 5-year-old can lock, right? You put something in a box and you just put your finger, click, you lock it, right? Okay. Now, even though you're the one who locked it, you can't open it, right? Because only I have the key, right? Now, to expand on that analogy, imagine if the padlock in particular is a super, super advanced padlock. So even the idea of trying to pick it or try to break it in some way would be next to impossible, right? So you have something super easy to lock and secure, right? Using the public key, right? But very difficult to unlock. Another part of the analogy is imagine if we use this system in the physical world. Let's get out of digital and get to the physical world, right? So the public keys in this analogy, it's a padlock, right? So we have several types of padlocks, right? That they're identified by some code. So my padlock that I use could be called Blue 45, right? So if you go to a place that has public padlocks, right, and you request a Blue 45, that's going to be a padlock that I have access to unlock. I have the key for it, but only me. No one else has the key for this lock, right? So although you can see it publicly, you can go in a store and say, I want a Blue 45 padlock, you can get it and you can secure whatever you want. I'm the only one that has the key to unlock that particular padlock. And that is essentially how the encryption works with an app like Signal. So you really need access to both the public and private key to decrypt the messages, right? And again, the only person who has a private key is the recipient. So that's the sort of the basics of the encryption that they're using, and the open source nature, which is part of the security, because again, by us being able to see the code, they can't really be, Signal as a company can't be doing sneaky stuff in theory, because again, if they try to do that, we could see it. If it was not open source, then we would have no idea behind the scenes. Like, we'd need to see the code. We would have no idea behind the scenes what they're doing. So in theory, Signal could be snooping on us and we would never know. But again, because it's open source and because of the encryption that they use, and there's also, I think there's even a third key. I think there's another level of encryption where for I think they use another key that for every message you send, it rotates or increments every single time. So it's like even if somehow you were able to hack in and get access to one of the messages, you might not be able to see any more. So it's a lot more than just public key, private key. There's a lot of other stuff involved as well, stuff that I'm not going to mention in this video. I just wanted to talk really about the key system, which for those of you on GitHub, you might be familiar with, but you might not have understood how that sort of technology works behind the scenes. Because with GitHub, and I presume GitLab as well, you can set up a secure key where you would have the private key on your device, and then there's a public key that is known externally. And then whenever you want to sort of upload or download or whatever it is from your repository, you are the only one who can do certain things because it requires, again, the public and the private key. Beyond that, in terms of protocol and procedure and risk, so you can use all the security that you want, right? Signal app, public key, private key, a million different keys, right? 1 trillion bit encryption, right? Quantum processor, whatever. You can do whatever you want to do. But remember, when it comes to security, right? Think of it like a chain. I think you guys know where I'm headed with this. Think of security like a chain. And by the way, this summer I'm going to be a keynote speaker for a conference that's going to be in New York, and we're going to be talking about security in the from the perspective of Wall Street and trading systems. So I will keep you posted for that. I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, think of security as a chain, and that means that, I'm sure you've heard it before, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You can use the craziest security that you want, right? Some alien from another planet comes down and gives you some kind of a 1 trillion key authentication thing, and it's interdimensional, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Because the strength of your chain, your security chain, right, as a concept, not an actual thing, right, is based on the weakest element, right? So what do we just see with our government, right? We saw them violating their procedures and protocols. They shouldn't have been communicating on this app. And in their minds, they may have thought that it was fine because they're using a highly secured app. So what's the point? What's the big deal? Well, we saw exactly what's the big deal. How did a journalist get access to these messages, right? Because there's no security that the Signal app can provide to our government that will basically circumvent the weakest link in their chain of security, right? What's the weakest link? The way that they communicated so informally, just via a group chat, via some private app. It's not one of their own apps. And they weren't following, obviously, government protocol, right? So therefore, that's how this journalist got on the list. What would be, I don't know their procedures and protocols, right? But just, I'm thinking from a Wall Street perspective, how we think about security. Obviously, security is a big deal on Wall Street, right? So I understand enterprise level security protocols and procedures. So I can, just on the top of my head, think about some stuff that they would have in place. So number one, you wouldn't be allowed to use a private app, right? you would, let's just say you would not be likely to use a private app. And even if you were to, even if they allowed it, it would be, it would be, what's the word I'm looking for? It would be very, very controlled in how and when and who can use it, how you can use it. There would be a protocol. You wouldn't just willy nilly, hey, let's start a group chat and blah, 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 blah. No, that's not the way it would work. Enterprise level security, what would it be? You'd probably use an app that is a government app that we built, right? So we control it. We have full access to it. It meets all of our security standards. Number two, you'd have a protocol in terms of anybody can't just like put a group together and start chatting, right? I mean, it depends on what you're chatting about, right? If they were communicating about their war plans, this would be highly secret, highly sensitive. So something like that, you'd have to put the highest level of security, right? So that would mean everything locked down, right? So you would have some kind of a security grouping, right? So you have like a command group, right? The command group would consist of people who are at the higher level, right? Who have the highest level of security, right? And to get on this group requires several levels of approvals, right? Every member of this communications group needs to be approved by several levels, right? So everyone on that group is completely vetted, right? So if you're going to communicate highly sensitive information, you would be required to use an official group that has the security level required for the information you're putting out there. So even if you, by some mistake, you send it to the wrong person, at least that person would be someone in our government and someone with high level of security. But there's no way, no matter how much you mess around and fat finger, it just would be impossible for you to get that information out to someone who does not have the security clearance. So definitely a journalist is not getting it. One of our enemies is, that's another thing could have happened. Just the same way they sent a journalist by accident, they could have sent it to the very country that they bombed. Can you imagine sending out your war plans to the country that you're bombing and they know you're coming, or sending it to a country that is not friendly to America and they had gotten those plans and they could have ambushed our troops? I mean, it could have been so bad. And again, I would like to use this as an example. I know a lot of us get frustrated with the procedures and the red tape sometimes. It seems like it's, why can't I just, like me, I'm human, right? I didn't like every time I want to get on the server, I have to go put in a ticket and then maybe the person isn't available and I got to wait and I got stuff to do and I'm sitting here waiting. But there's a reason why we have these rules and protocols, right? And if you don't have them, or if you have them and you don't follow them, this is the kind of thing that can happen. You can end up sending your war plans to some journalist, right? Or worst case, an enemy of the country by accident, right? Rules and procedures are put in place for a reason. If the rules and procedures are deemed to be too, burdensome, too difficult, right? Then come up with a more efficient way to be safe, right? And to mitigate risks. The solution is not just to remove them. Like, for example, in my scenario, we had a procedure where we had to request access to access these servers. Every time I need to access it, I had to, it's not like I'm on a list and then when I need to go on the server, I can go on it because I'm an authorized user. No, every single instance, I needed to request and get approved to access that server. The solution is to not just like, let's not do that. If they needed a higher level of security, which clearly they did, that's why they're doing that, then have a way that we could maybe make it faster. So instead of me waiting for someone, maybe it's an automated process or something, or just figure out something, figure out a faster way. But what is never the solution is to just remove the procedures and safety protocols. That's never the solution. Like we see with this whole Doge thing where they just like, let's forget about background checks. We want to fast. You can be fast and you can also be smart, right? You can be strategic. You can be methodical in how you do things, right? And that is the nature of how we do things on Wall Street, right? We have a lot of risk, right? billions of dollars on the line. We cannot make mistakes. We cannot have failures. We have to be precise in what we're doing, but we also need to be fast. Everything is about time. So we know about the desire to be fast. We know about the desire to be on the leading edge. You want to be innovators. You want to be, trendsetters, right? Other firms trying to figure out what we're doing, why we're getting better executions or whatever. We understand that, right? But we also understand that in order to be successful, we have to have a very effective risk mitigation procedure, because it doesn't make any sense if we're super fast and everything's getting done, boom, 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 and then we don't have the safety procedures. So then one mistake in seconds, billions of dollars lost, right? The risks are too high. We need to play that delicate game of balancing speed and efficiency with also precision and accuracy, right? So again, a procedure would have been not to use the Signal app, and then however you use it, again, authorized groups, authorized people. And when you do things like that, you avoid mistakes like that. There's other procedures as well, because I've had scenarios where some companies I've worked for didn't have effective some procedures they didn't have in terms of safety procedures. So email. You have someone in the company whose name is Fred Thompson, right? You have a client whose name is Fred Thompson. You're using Microsoft Outlook, which does autocomplete. You type in Fred, and then Thompson gets filled in, and there's the email. And if you're not paying attention, you end up adding a client name to your email and send out sensitive information to a client. Fortunately, some of the, pretty sure it's many, of the big banks and investment banking companies, again, we are very smart about mitigating risk. We have to be, right? So what do we have in place? Procedures and protocols to avoid these kinds of things. So if you're sending out an email and you include someone who is not part of the firm, a lot of banks, what they're doing is they have mechanisms in place that will stop you and say, hey, you've included someone who's outside of your organization. FYI, all right? Just so you know, someone on this list does not work for the company. Now, without things like that, you're just sending messages all willy-nilly. That can be very, very damaging on so many levels, right? Procedures and protocols can be annoying. It can be frustrating. But the price of being sloppy, the price of not being precise, the price of just not being very thoughtful in what you're doing and not understanding the gravity of how important security is, the cost of that is things like our government sending out their war plans to a journalist by accident. And that's not only a risk in terms of the operational security, right, of that mission. That mission was potentially compromised because of this, right? It's also reputational damage. How does it look to the world that the United States, in our government, people at the highest levels of our government, would operate in such a sloppy manner? On a day-to-day basis, I am interacting with billions of dollars of potential risk, right? The systems that I'm on, there's billions of dollars of risk going through these systems. And yet, we use much better security protocols than what we see in our own government, where it's trillions and it's global. And that is reputationally damaging, that a country of our size and wealth and power, that we would operate at a lower level than just some investment bank who, to be sure, it's a lot of money, but nothing compared to the United States government, right? Trillions of dollars, that's not what we're dealing with, right? billions of dollars, but yet we have higher standards in terms of how we operate, following rules and procedures, right? We don't just bring in some billionaire coming in and like, oh, we don't need to do that. I don't worry about that. Oh, background checks. Oh, don't worry about that stuff. We got it fast. Let's get it done. Get it done. Ooh, oops, I made a mistake. Oops, I made. We don't allow that on Wall Street, right? We don't allow that on Wall Street. That's not how we play. And our government should be, if anything, more secure than we are in investment banking, not less secure. Stuff to think about. This is Carl Speaks Wall Street, and these are my thoughts on the Signal incident. Let me take a quick look at the comments section. Okay. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be secure. Make sure your signals don't get crossed.